Hello there, my wonderful friends. It is a beautiful day, the birds are shining, the sun is singing, and just like any day, it is a perfect day for talking about the Switch. Now, I know I've talked an awful lot about the system's 2017 lineup, but I just want to stress one more time how ridiculous it is. It's always worth noting how first-year droughts are a normal thing with both Nintendo and non-Nintendo systems. A lot goes into getting the thing on shelves and getting those initial fans to pick it up, but after that, it can take a good while before the big games really start coming in. Yet the Switch is bucking that trend. It launched with a brain exploder like Zelda, and since then, we've seen a major first-party release nearly every month. And these aren't just mini-game collections, party games, stuff like that. We're talking big, single and multiplayer games. 2 ports, sure, but 2 ports of very popular games that came from a system with very few owners. I mean, look at this year so far. March, Zelda. April, Mario Kart. June, ARMS, which is a new IP I might add. July, Splatoon. August, Mario and Rabbids. Technically a Ubisoft game, but it's still a Mario game and still exclusive and still awesome. September, Pokken Tournament. October, Fire Emblem Warriors and Super Mario Odyssey, a mere week apart I might add. Nothing for November, but there's a bunch of third-party stuff, and October had 2. Then December, Xenoblade 2. That is pure insanity, my friends. Nintendo says this is a reflection of the lessons they learned with the Wii U. They realized that they needed a steady stream of games to keep up interest throughout the year. But I feel like this explanation is selling them a little short. It's not just that these releases are regular. It's that they're, like I said, big, exciting games that fans really want to play. If instead of ARMS we got WarioWare, and instead of Splatoon we got Mario Party, and instead of Xenoblade we got Wii Fit, things would look very different. There's nothing inherently wrong with these more casual and/or blue ocean games, but they work better as a supplement for the real meaty stuff. And so far, Nintendo has catered 2017 with a veritable all-you-can-eat buffet of meaty stuff. Hot dogs, prime rib, whatever you want. And don't forget, all this is only in the 10 months since launch. There's still technically time for Nintendo to fit 1 or 2 more games in before next March if they want to. I don't just want to gush about the lineup though, I want to talk about what it means for the company and for the Switch and what it might mean moving forward. And one thing that's really surprised me about this whole situation is that apart from Zelda, which got moved up to the Switch's launch, none of these games were delayed. Like, have you noticed that? At the January event, Nintendo announced a bunch of games. Most of them were slated for launch windows within 2017, and those games just sort of came out. Within those launch windows even. And I'm not used to that. I'm really not. Video games are a complicated business, making them takes a lot of time. And while I don't think Nintendo has straight up lied about release dates, I do think sometimes they've been a little loose with their estimates, maybe a little too optimistic, because hey, they can always push the game back if they need to. I'm not going to start listing all the games of the last few generations that were delayed, but a game being delayed really started to seem like the norm. I like to think I'm generally a positive person, but there are situations where I can be decently pessimistic. And when I'm consistently disappointed by something, I start always assuming the worst so that I'm not disappointed anymore. And because of this, particularly with the Wii U, I could spot a delayed game from a mile away. Nintendo would be like, this game is coming this year, this game is coming early next year, and I would just be like, nope, not happening, getting delayed, and 90% of the time, I was right. Nintendo says they generally like to hold off on revealing a game until they're decently close to releasing it, but the Wii U and the 3DS both flew in the face of that idea. We're talking games that made us wait upwards of 2 years between reveal and release. By the time it was localized and released in the US, Xenoblade Chronicles X took 2.5, and Breath of the Wild was a few months shy of 3 years from its initial teaser trailer. So naturally, it just got to the point where I tried not to get too excited when watching a trailer for a new game, even if I wanted the game, because I knew I might be sitting on that hype for ages. And the worst part was that Nintendo, as we all know, was having a hard time developing enough software for 2 separate systems. There just weren't as many first-party titles on the Wii U as I think many of us would have liked. So I got into this thing where whenever they announced a game that I wasn't interested in, even if the game looked great by its own right, but just not something I was personally into, I would get so bummed, because I knew that that was just one more game that they would talk about at every E3 and in every Nintendo Direct, and that would get a release window, then another release window, then a date for half a year later. It was one more game that would take up another one of Nintendo's precious software development slots, as it were, potentially for years. They could only make so many games at once, so if I wasn't into what they had cooking, I'd just have to be like, oh well, maybe there'll be something for me to play next Christmas. So going into that Switch presentation, I wasn't getting my hopes up about any dates or estimates. I enjoyed the the presentation overall and was really optimistic about the Switch. I mean, the reveal of Super Mario Odyssey alone was enough for the whole thing to just blow my mind completely. But when they said Mario would be releasing in 2017, I was thinking, no way. That game's way too big to release that soon after launch. They revealed Fire Emblem Warriors and it was just a teaser. All we saw was a little animation with the name. So I'm thinking no gameplay, they probably just started, so late 2018 at the earliest. Then Xenoblade Chronicles 2? After how long it took X to come out, I was like 2019 for sure, no question. Then there was ARMS. As I've said before, it looks like a great game, lots of people love it, just not my thing, and I knew that from the first trailer. And when I saw that trailer, all I could think about was how I was looking at 2 years of everyone endlessly talking about the game while I just twiddled my thumbs waiting for Nintendo to get past it so they could work on another game already. But here we are, nearing the end of the year, and Nintendo made it all happen. They stuck to every single release window, and when Xenoblade 2 comes out in December, that'll make a perfect score. That'll be a Yahtzee. I still can't even believe it, and the more I think about it, the more I wonder if other people once felt the same way I did, and if that might have colored their reaction to the January event. If I had to pick one way or the other, I'd say reactions to the event were positive overall, but I did see a great number of people who came away unimpressed. In retrospect, it seems a little ridiculous to not be impressed with such a huge list of new games. I mean, even when Nintendo was regularly doing the traditional E3 thing, it was considered a good year when we got more than one big hitter, and the Switch event gave us both Mario and Splatoon, which I would consider the big hitters, plus a ton of other exciting stuff. Yet a lot of people were still just like, not enough. This is just a theory, but do you think they were unimpressed because they were also coming out of this sort of funk where they thought half of it would be delayed into the next year and beyond anyway? Maybe when they looked at that big list of games, they didn't see games for the next year. They saw games for the next 2 years plus, and that prevented them from seeing how great the lineup really was. And I'm more likely to believe that this is the case because of the general reception of this recent E3. When you're talking about the sheer number of new games announced, the January event and E3 2017 were decently close. The event was about announcement after announcement, whereas E3 was more about talking up previously announced games. New ones announced for Beyond 2017 were Kirby, Yoshi, Metroid Prime 4, and Pokemon, and those were certainly fan favorites, but 2 of them were only mentions and might not even hit shelves next year. I would argue that Super Mario Odyssey was everything as big as Pokemon or Metroid, and Splatoon wasn't too close behind, and each had actual trailers with gameplay, versus E3's teasers. And yet, the Switch event saw a lot of criticism, and E3 saw near universal praise. It was hailed by many as the best presentation of the year. So naturally, one question is, was the reception of E3 all the warmer because people's perspectives were changing? Because by E3, Nintendo had already either released or given solid release dates to nearly every game they said was slated for 2017. I'll admit, a lot of it might also have been the fact that the Switch had recently been released and everyone was still just jazzed on the whole thing, but I'd be surprised if this new world of timely Nintendo releases didn't have something to do with it. I think the previously announced games just looked so good that they carried the show, and the new announcements were all the more exciting because, hey, maybe some of these games will actually come out in the near future. Maybe Yoshi will actually release in 2018 instead of taking, oh my gosh, Woolly World took nearly 3 years after the initial announcement? Why? With this new trend of lots of games releasing fast and on time, one has to wonder, what's changed? How are they keeping up this pace without blasting us with delays? The way I see it, there are a few possible factors. The most obvious one is the Switch itself. Nintendo merged their handheld and home console divisions, and while the 3DS has seen a good few releases over the last year or so, it's obvious that things are ramping down. Nintendo's been putting more of their development talent into their shiny new hybrid, and if they were once able to split themselves 2 ways successfully, now, assuming the 3DS doesn't get a successor, which I highly doubt at this point, they're looking at one system with as strong a library as you could ever hope for. If we're lucky, this is indeed the reason 2017 has been going so well, because that would bode well for next year and beyond. It would mean Nintendo has simply turned into a game-producing powerhouse. Secondly, though, you've got President Kimishima, and this is really just a theory here, but it's one I think is worth thinking about. Iwata was awesome. We all loved Iwata, and he led Nintendo into their single most profitable era. He very sadly passed away and was replaced by Kimishima just as the Wii U was on its way out and the Switch was on its way in. There's no way for me to know exactly what goes on at Nintendo or who gets to make what decisions, and I know Iwata was around when the Switch was being worked on, but it's possible that Kimishima stepped into his new position and started changing stuff up. I mean, think about it. You've got Iwata, speaker of this now legendary quote. He's a gamer at heart. He's playful. His Blue Ocean strategy is what launches the DS and the Wii to crazy success. But when the market changes, he's not completely sure how to change with it. Later on, Kimishima takes the lead. I don't know anything about the guy, but on the surface, he's this older, more stern-looking gentleman. He looks like a businessman. Suddenly, we get a product that's simple, functional, with a clear purpose. We get straightforward, effective marketing. We get lots of games coming at a steady rate. Maybe Nintendo's got twice the development power to play with now, and maybe Kimishima's also in there cracking the whip. Get this game done and make it good. I want it by summer and I want it to win awards. No, you can't take a year before you start active development. No, you can't play around with concepts for 2 years. Get on it now, chop chop. It's a little funny, but hey, you never know, right? Kimishima took the lead right before things started turning around for Nintendo. This new way of operating obviously raises many questions, but for me the biggest one right now is, can we expect it to continue? Is this simply the way things are now, whether because of a unified platform or a new president or something else, or was 2017 the exception? I mean, it's also certainly possible that this year was amazing purely at the expense of the Wii U, and to a lesser extent the 3DS. By the end of the Wii U's life, the games had slowed to a crawl. It felt a lot like we were looking at placeholder titles, and that Nintendo was probably putting most of their efforts into the Switch. If that's the case, the Switch's life might indeed be front-loaded. Maybe Nintendo wanted so badly to make a case for the system, get it moving off shelves, get third parties hopping on board, that they worked their hardest to turn 2017 into one heck of a first year. It's very possible that expecting as much from 2018 is just setting ourselves up for disappointment. However, I don't think that's the case. I don't think Nintendo's just front-loading this generation for a number of reasons. Mostly, it just goes against everything else they're doing, delivering big, exciting games that really please fans, releasing games with good timing and without delay, spreading releases out over the course of a year, just overall making smarter business decisions. That doesn't point to a one-and-done, all eggs in one basket Nintendo. That points to a more productive and efficient Nintendo. And in the case of releasing 2 first-party titles within 1 week of each other with a gigantic JRPG adventure on the way a month later, also the holiday season is packed to the brim with stuff to play, it just screams confidence. I'm not gonna bet money or anything, and I'm still not willing to get my hopes up so high that anything less than 100 mind-blowing games in 2018 will just crush me, but I'm feeling optimistic about the future. I'm looking to the next big Nintendo presentation, and that idea is getting me pretty excited. Will they have another big January event, even if it's just a Nintendo Direct rather than a stage show? Nintendo's great at doing what we don't expect, but right now my money's on yes. The company's already experimented with bigger quarterly directs, and they've even tried largely skipping E3, but if you ask me, 2017's model was perfection. A big event right after Christmas at the start of the year to announce most of the games for that year. A spring direct to build on those announcements, give some release dates, and maybe announce some smaller games. Another big one at E3 in June to further build on the big holiday stuff and drop a few surprises to get us psyched for the next year, and one last direct late summer, early fall to finish out the year, build up those holiday releases one last time and give them all solid release dates. Every year we get 2 big ones with lots of announcements and 2 smaller ones to supplement them. If I had my way, it would stay this way, and I would love to look forward to each of them in the same way we look forward to E3. I mean, for a Nintendo fan, it would essentially mean 2 E3s a year. Really, we can't be sure how later Nintendo Directs and E3s are gonna go, or if they're gonna be able to keep up this rate of releases, or if suddenly we're gonna get a flood of casual and party games. But if there's one thing I'm all but certain about, it's that attitude change regarding release window accuracy. It's just such a drastic shift from Nintendo of the past. It took close to a year of consistently delivering and holding to their promises, but man, I'm a believer now. Until I'm given a reason to doubt again, I'm gonna move forward believing them when they say spring 2018, or summer 2019, or Secretary's Day 2035. And you know one thing that really got through to me in this regard, that really helped sway me back in this direction? It's how Nintendo handled the Pokemon and Metroid announcements. Now, I could easily be wrong, I'm not reviewing every promotional event Nintendo's ever put out before making this claim, but to my knowledge, Nintendo doesn't generally estimate that a game will come beyond the year following the announcement, even if it most likely will. Like, I don't have any memory of them revealing a game in 2005, for instance, and being like, TBA 2007. It just never happens. A far-off game is always touted as next year. If it ends up coming a year beyond that, it gets delayed into that year. But when Pokemon Company CEO Tsunekazu Ishihara came on screen to tell us they were working on a core Pokemon game for Switch, he didn't flash a year on the screen or give us some narrow release window. He was real with us. He said 2018 is possible, but it might be later. Then Metroid didn't even give us a date. Someone came out and made it sound like it was set for 2018, but they later clarified that that was not necessarily the case. So we're looking at 2 games that are really early in development, and Nintendo's being totally realistic about their development time. And combined with them keeping their promises about 2017 release dates and windows, well, they're just building up a heck of a lot of trust. That makes them look good, and it makes us happy. What more can I say? And something of an aside, you might be saying, but Arlo, you were just praising them for not waiting a million years between reveals and releases, but now you're praising them for announcing Metroid and Pokemon potentially a million years in advance. What gives? And also, you look really handsome today. First off, thank you. But secondly, the difference here is that Nintendo was upfront and honest, and also because they had what I felt were good reasons for announcing the game so far ahead of time. They're trying hard to establish the Switch as a brand, so they felt that it was important to communicate what the Switch is all about. Reggie said as much himself when asked about the timing of the Metroid reveal. There's been so much discontent surrounding the Metroid franchise that they wanted to tell fans not to worry. A remake of Metroid 2 is not the furthest they're willing to go. They're working on the next big thing for Metroid, and it's exactly what most people were screaming for. They wanted to let everyone know what kind of system the Switch is and what kinds of games to expect on it. And I talked about all this in my video on the announcement, card in the corner if you haven't seen it. This wasn't just Nintendo using a wink and a promise to get us to go buy a Switch. It was a message that said so much more than mere words possibly could. I mean, it was mere words, technically, but I mean, it was a logo, and it was a 4. Never mind, you know what I mean. Then Pokemon, same sort of thing. We were all wondering what the future of Pokemon looked like, and more importantly, how far Nintendo was willing to go with the Switch. Were they gonna treat the system too much like a home console and keep making Pokemon games for 3DS, or maybe its successor, which we all hoped dearly was not a thing? We still don't have a definite answer on the 4DS front, but telling us about Pokemon on the Switch was pretty much all we needed to feel safe. Instead of keeping us in limbo for years, wondering how things were gonna go down, they let us know outright. You all know the next Pokemon is inevitable, so that's no secret, but get excited because the future of Pokemon is on the Switch. Your new little system is gonna be everything you want it to be. So there you have it, the guy who initially built his channel by talking smack about Nintendo, continuing to sing the company's praises. Hey, what can I say, man? They ain't perfect, but they're bringing those games, and they're bringing them what good. So what about you? What do you think about this whole Switch thing? I mean, just like the Switch in general. I think it's lame myself. Just a glorified Wii U tablet without any games. I think I'll go throw mine away. Whoops, look at that. I turned on Super Mario Odyssey instead. Funny how that keeps happening.